If you have ever wanted to know how to mitigate a risk without having to deploy a patch, this session is for you. Qualys's Eran Livni, Senior Director of Product Management, alongside Corey Amsler, the Director of Risk Management at EVM, will discuss how automating patching and innovative mitigation strategies can help you reduce the risk to your business.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. So I'm the last one today, so hopefully I can entertain you for the next 40 minutes. We have actually a very exciting thing that I'm very excited to share with you. We're introducing a new capability to our remediation arsenal. But before I go there, let's start with a few interesting slides. So what I'm going to cover in this presentation. First of all, I want to make sure that you all understand we want to help you fix vulnerabilities faster. That's my goal. That's Qualys' goal. Okay? And I'm going to take you through this presentation to show you how you can be more efficient. Now, I'm going to talk about patching in the beginning, but I'm going to go quickly because I have Corey from GE, which can do a much better job than I do, and talk and expand about how they use patch and how they use our solution. And then, after Corey's done, I'm going to start talking about what's next, how we can help you solve vulnerability that do not have a patch. Okay? And we have a great demo of a product we're going to release very, very soon, literally in about 2 weeks. So let's start. The big question is, how can we be more efficient? This is a quote that is from the National Cybersecurity Center. This is a UK institute, but if you read it, you see how accurate it is. A vulnerability management process shouldn't exist in isolation. It is a cross-cutting effort and involved not just working in IT operation, but also security and risk teams. Okay? And that's the key. It's not only us in security that have to deal with it. It has to be a cross-project that works between the team. And we at Qualys understand that and pressure this, and all our tools and all the capability that we provide take this into consideration. Okay? So always remember, when we say we patch something, it's not that you guys are going to click something and everything is patched, all good. We understand that your security teams still need to go and test things, and they have all the processes. Okay? So everything that we build, including the new capabilities, take those things into consideration. So let's start our journey. Let's first understand what this means. The more vulnerabilities you have open, the more patches you have to deploy, which means the more changes you have to make. As a result, you may break something. So our goal is not to patch everything, but to patch what actually is important. And this entire day, we've talked about how do we prioritize and how do we choose what's important. Okay? So TrueRisk and all our QDS algorithm will help you get there. But what I want you to get from this slide is very important. Because Qualys understand risk, our reporting, our capabilities will help you close this gap and basically patch what you need to patch. Now, because we are the one that are doing the risk, it's very easy for us, easy double quote, to actually tell you how to prioritize and how to take those actions and what action to take. And that's one big advantage that you have when you use your vulnerability solution to actually do the patching. Next, patch management. And here I'm going to go fast because, again, Corey will go in much more details. So first of all, patch was introduced, and there is a nice history line there. But patch was introduced like 4 years ago. This year alone, we have deployed 78 million patches from January. Yeah, that's actually a big wow. I will say we're one of the biggest patch vendors out there, and we're a security company. Okay? You can see the other two numbers, 24 days. So customers that are using us for patch are 24 days faster addressing CISA vulnerabilities. Basically, you're able to respond to the CISA faster. And 160 million vulnerability. We're not talking about patches here. We're talking about 160 million CISA vulnerabilities. Big difference. We don't care about the patches. We care about how much risk you can reduce, how many vulnerabilities you can reduce. And those are the numbers. So the first thing our customers are using is smart automation. And as every year when I talk at QSC, I always mention we're not just automating, we're doing it smartly. Basically focusing on your risk. So automate and fix what you can with the lowest operational risk possible. So usually what customers are doing, they are working with our IT team to look at the reports to see what product introduced the most risk, but at the same time, what product introduced the most risk and less operational risk. Again, the example is always the browsers, those Firefoxes, the Adobe ones. You can easily automate them. There's no reason why you cannot automate. And you can take it to the next level and do it based on ransomware capability. So if you have a ransomware on a desktop, you can just go ahead and fix it. Another thing that I want you to remember is the communication friction between IT and security, which is usually a huge thing, right? What are we doing today? We are running all those reports, we're prioritizing things, and then we're sending this over to IT team to go ahead and fix, right? But then IT needs to go ahead and understand, what do I mean by all those vulnerabilities? What do they mean? What do I need to do? What actions do I need to take? And the entire idea of this product is to take all those QAD that you guys found and translate them and tell IT, here's what you need to do. Here, go ahead and do that. Why do we want to do it? Because we want to remove from IT all the extra work that they have to do. Remember, those guys will have 4 or 5 hours of a maintenance window that they need to deploy all the patches that you guys ask them to do. If you also ask them to do the research, they can just do less. So if you give them, you tell them, here's what you need to do. If you do those steps, we know that the vulnerability will go away. You just save them a lot of time. So they can actually deploy more patches, more configuration changes at the same time. So they can be more efficient. And last but not least, separation of duty. As I said, we understand that it exists. We don't claim and we don't ask you to take the responsibility of IT and you guys deploy all the patches. Even though we do have customers that actually took the responsibility and now the security team is the one that's deploying the patches, many other customers are using us with the separation and duty in mind. So either the IT team will continue to use SCCM and use us on top of that, so to complement it, or they'll let IT use our tool to deploy those patches. And again, the benefit is clear because they can create automation, it's very simple, and you have full visibility between the two sides. So IT and security can see the same thing. And with that, I would like to invite Corey from GE to share with us more about how they use our product and basically give you an overview of our patch. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Ron. Hi, everyone. Let's see. There we go. I'm Corey Amsler, Director, Risk Management, EVM, or Enterprise Vulnerability Management. I did a presentation last year. Samed had a stat. There was 8 people here with risk in their title. So I actually went over to the registration a couple hours ago. I said, hey, how many people are here now with risk in their title? Because that's what every marketing piece has, right? 22. So we tripled it almost. So good for us, right? So I've been at GE, or GE Vernova now, for 15 years. Started with desk side and getting the hands dirty, moved up. I spent 5 years in patching. Obviously, I had this security guy saying, hey, here's your Qualys vulnerabilities. And I said, I don't care about that. I have a process, and then you can be true, right? Lo and behold, now here I own the process I was complaining about. So be careful what you wish for, right? So GE Vernova. We talked earlier about this boom, right? And everyone, you don't know when the boom's coming, except I did, right? April 2nd, 2024, GE was splitting into GE Aerospace and GE Vernova, right? We are a energy company, right? Gas turbines, nuclear, hydro, power distribution as well. We could, everything from when we generate all the way down almost into your house, right? But we knew the bang was coming, or the boom, I should say. And how oftentimes do you know that? Well, the good thing is we're able to shift left, prepare for that boom. From an EVM perspective, we were able to do a Qualys greenfield environment. We didn't want we've had a relationship with Qualys for 13 years at that time, so we didn't want to take that baggage. We wanted to clean, a fresh state. We are in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We have 75,000 employees, and we generate 25% of the world's power, right? So real pretty big in company, right? 55,000 wind turbines, 7,000 gas generators. So this generator you see there, that is almost a football field. One of those rotors is way bigger than me, right? But we also make a generator that fits on this stage. So we do all the needs, fit all needs. So with that boom that we had, we also built our Qualys instance, but the CTO, or Chief Technology Officers, came to us with a problem. They had to build quickly because they knew when the boom was as well, and they had a request. We have infrastructure on-prem and multi-clouds, just like probably everyone else out here, right? With that, though, we also had bespoke patching process, right? For Microsoft Cloud, you're using Update Manager. AWS, you're using SSM. On-prem, you might have a Windows Update server and whatever else you do for your Linux stuff, right? Custom scripts, whatever you need, right? So they came and said, hey, how can we help, right? Well, obviously, we know how we helped because I wouldn't be speaking here on the stage if we didn't pick Qualys Patch Management, right? So a couple reasons why we picked it, right? Fast deployment and implementation. We're already using it for VMDR, right? So it's on all of our servers. Well, as Mike said earlier, 100%. Everyone strives to get 100%. We know that's not always, capable or possible, but it's on the bulk of our servers. So with a click of a button, well, maybe 2 buttons, and a check. Yeah, gotta remember that check you pay for the Qualys. But with that, patch management was turned on, right? Fully functioning, covered all the assets with all the deployments. When we look at expandability, as soon as you put Qualys Agent on the box, not only does it get VMDR, it gets patch, right? And then unification of processes. You remember I talked about we had at least 4 different processes across our infrastructure. Now we have one tool, one process. So the partnership that we got with the CTO organization, and this is key, because how many of you actually are tied in, we're all security professionals, tied in with your CTO office? We really, I give credit to our leaders as we started this new company that was 130 years old. They said, we want to break down barriers, break down silos, and we're empowered to do that. So there was no hesitation with security having the control for patching. The CTO still pulls the arm, but it's a security tool. Well, it's not anymore. But with that, standardized tagging, right? We pull in tags from cloud. We have AWS and Azure connectors. We're using CSAM. We also use, with ServiceNow and CSAM, you can do custom attributes. If you don't know about that, check it out or talk to me after this. It's a really cool feature. So with those, we're able to then have standardized tagging, and we never have to touch it, right? We don't have to touch that tag because whether it's coming in through a cloud connector and that EC2 asset has a maintenance schedule and other tags, or it's in our CMDB for on-prem assets, it flows in automatically. So, the teams don't have to do anything. Honestly, they set up the jobs and it runs, which means firm and repeatable patching schedule. So, and then the last thing is key, right? Role-based access. With that tagging, we're able to do some really cool things there. CTO organization, maybe 80% of the servers are patched by one group. And then you have this database group over here. They say, hey, regular people, don't patch my stuff because it can't go down. Okay, well, we have different taggings there. So guess what? Now the regular people that patch the regular OS cannot touch the database guys, and vice versa, right? So it's fantastic. The guys love it because they're not going to do harm on someone else's system. Now, with that, we went through a couple months, and remember, this was all from February timeframe when we started this initiative. So we're moving fast, really fast here. And when you move fast, there's fail. You always fail fast, right, as well. We failed a couple times, right? Some of our own learnings, some with Qualys. So here, we found out you need some certs that maybe we didn't have. What's really cool, patch management needed certs to look at some of the repos. But what we were able to do was use patch management and a pre-action to fix those certs. Bless you. So we were able to use the tool to fix the server so it could use the tool. I mean, it's really neat there, right? We didn't have to rely on, SSM or Update Manager to go. We're able to do that in the tool. And the other piece, if everyone here knows what went end of life at the end of June, Linux 7, right? So, you might not be able to get off of all that infrastructure quickly, but you still want to secure it. So we actually purchased extended update support. That is actually not native in Qualys Patch Management. You have a patch catalog that has certain updates that they scan for, but they don't know about these end-of-life extended support updates. So here again, with some Qualys help as well, we're able to use that pre-script action to do full patching ourselves on a box, running yum update, etc. Also configuring the box, because we all have developers that may or may not have access to your servers, and those developers may or may not like to mess around with repo configs, bring their own in, and break patching. So with that, we're able to fix those repo configs, and we're able to patch those CentOS 7 servers that we have extended support on. Excuse me. And then after that, so I run the EVM team, or Enterprise Vulnerability Management team. We said, what can we do with this tool, right? CTO is now off and running, but they only patch the OS level, right? There's a bunch of third-party vulnerabilities up there that are, your developers might be like, well, someone else put that on the box. It's not part of my application. I'm not going to patch it. We're like, what? No, you have to do it. But we said, how about we try and assist you on that? So we targeted very high-risk, low impact meaning whenever we patched, we didn't have to reboot, et cetera. Specifically targeting those browsers, right? Google Chrome, I think it was mentioned earlier, they had 6 or 7 0 days in July and August alone, right? So we patch weekly, and the great thing about it is, the most difficult thing for us patching third-party vulnerabilities right now is change tickets. We don't have to touch the jobs in Qualys. It just runs every week because we already have all those tags built. If you're doing Notepad++ or any other thing, Wireshark, whatever is on your box, we use CCM and create those tags dynamically. Then those dynamic tags are within our patch job. We don't have to touch it, unless an investor call or a QCS comes up that you can't have downtime. Then your CEO says, no, don't patch this week, and then you pause the job for that week. Otherwise, my team has more trouble getting change tickets than they do the job because they don't touch it. So just real quick wrap up the results, right? We're able to rapidly close vulnerabilities. We onboarded thousands of servers. I can't give you the actual number because legal doesn't like that. And we've remediated multiple thousands of patches, even just by third-party patching, and then CTO on top of that. When we look at this as well, the patching foundation is set. We did multiple CTO organizations can do that. Now we have business owners that take care of their own boxes. They're like, hey, can I get in on this? Whether I can piggyback on CTO or I can use the tool myself. Because of all that standardized tagging, that is crucial. We're able to now expand that and continue to expand our offerings there. If you do want to follow me, there's my LinkedIn, or see me tonight, tomorrow, chat about this. I'm more than willing to share. And with that, I'll invite Eran back up on the stage to talk about something else that I am actually very excited about, which is TruRisk Mitigate.
Thanks. Okay, so let's continue our journey. We've talked about patch management. Now, as I said, we started with patch management, but our goal is not to patch. Our goal is to help you kill those vulnerabilities, okay? And patch can get you, I estimate, 70%, but it's not enough. There are other things that you need to do, and I bet you know all your IT guys that come back and say, registry keys, this thing, uninstall, how do we do those? How do we know what I need to do? And that's the reason we are introducing a new product, or a new expansion to our product. And I want to cover 3 classes of vulnerabilities that are very important, but are not addressed with patch management. First are vulnerabilities that do not have a patch at all. So this actually, I hope it will be bigger, but it says on top, it says Windows SMB version 1, the other one is TLS 1.0, and the one to the right is an end-of-life software vulnerability. What is common for all of those guys? There's no patch for it. So if your guys are using SCCM, BigFix, whatever they use, they cannot patch it with a patch solution. Okay? So we need to provide a solution. How do I address vulnerability that don't have a patch at all? Second class of vulnerabilities are vulnerabilities that has a patch or have a patch, but our IT refuses to deploy the patch. Why? Because it's a mission critical application, and if we deploy the patch, there's a big risk of downtime. How do we address those vulnerabilities? Because the vulnerability is there, the risk is there. We have to address it. So how do I address this risk? Last but not least, those 0 days. Many 0 days are released without a patch. So what happens is the vendor will say, we'll get you a patch in a week, 2, 3 weeks. In the meantime, here's what you can do to mitigate the risk. How do I address those? And that's what we did. We releasing TruRisk Eliminate, which basically expanding our remediation beyond patch. Again, the goal is to help you remediate vulnerabilities. Patches was one way. Now we're expanding it to allow you to address different type of vulnerability. So what is TruRisk Eliminate? It basically includes 3 components: the patch management that we discussed, TruRisk Mitigate, and TruRisk Isolate. Okay? So it's a bundle SKU that includes different components underneath it. The idea here, if you have this TruRisk Eliminate, we will help you address any vulnerabilities that you can find in your environment. So let's double click into TruRisk Mitigate. What is TruRisk Mitigate? First of all, we built and building a catalog of mapping between a QAD, a vulnerability, into the remediation action that you need to make. So if you remember in the previous slide, we have this SMB 1.0, we have this TLS, we had this end-of-life software. So if there's a QAD, a CVE for end-of-life, here's the uninstall, here's what you can do. If there's a SMB vulnerability, here's the configuration change that you need to do to fix it. Okay? So basically, we're creating the same thing that we did with patch management. In patch management, you have a QAD. We map it to the patches that you need to deploy. Now what we're doing, we're actually taking this QAD and mapping it to the configuration change. Okay? Make sense so far? You with me, guys? Yes. Good. Second, what we're going to do, how are we going to help you with vulnerability that you guys don't want to patch? Let's even get better. Our research team, the same team that actually is finding those vulnerabilities and creating the catalog, will actually exploit those vulnerabilities and figuring out how we can mitigate. So what we can do to reduce the risk without the need to deploy a patch. Okay, again, what do we need to do to reduce the risk without the need to deploy a patch? You can see a few examples there. Block a port, stop a service. I have a demo and I'll show you a real example. Okay? But this is very, very beneficial because you don't deploy the patch, but at the same time, you reduce the risk. Now, the beauty here, and that's something I guarantee no other solution has, is the ability to reflect the results inside your VM tool. So once you deploy this mitigation, when you run a VMDR report, it will say this vulnerability is mitigated. So you can report back. Okay? So it's not enough to mitigate the vulnerability. You also want to make sure that we're testing and we're reporting that. So that's what we call TruRisk Mitigate. Now, one of the secrets here, because mitigation is usually a very simple thing, it's really easy to roll back. So if something went wrong, you can easily go back and roll back. Okay? And last but not least, as you can tell, as you know, when the 0 day is released, we are the first to create the QAD for it. We will create the QAD and how to fix it at the same time. Okay? So you'll have the QAD, and when your boss says, What can I do with all those, this new marquee vulnerability? We'll give you the script or the patch or whatever you need to either mitigate it or actually fix it. The big benefit here, when you think about it for a second, we are basically saving you a lot of time. Because I bet that most of you are already doing these things in some way or the other. But I bet you spend a lot of time. For example, if we go back to this mitigation, right? If you guys blocking a port to mitigate a vulnerability, somebody needs to do the research to figure out which port to mitigate, which ports to block, and actually does it solve the vulnerability? Does it mitigate the vulnerability? And by how much? Is a critical vulnerability now a medium vulnerability or a low vulnerability, or it stays high? Those things you have to do internally, which means any one of you is spending time doing that. We have an expert team that can do it for you. Let your IT team focus on fixing those things and mitigating those things, not doing the research. We will do the research for you. And that's the big promise here. So you can respond to those 0 days very quickly. So that's TruRisk Mitigate, and I'll show you a demo. It will be very clear. What is isolate? In case you cannot deploy the vulnerability or you cannot fix it after some time, as a last resort, you can isolate the device from the network. Okay? Now, this is not an EDR type of isolation. This isolation is designed to protect against somebody bad exploiting your vulnerabilities. Okay? That's the entire idea here. Now, of course, you can create exceptions, or our agent will continue to work. You can continue to patch those quarantine assets. But the idea here is to minimize the attack vector. Now, when I first worked on this feature, I was skeptical. But apparently, there are so many customers actually using it for compliance reason, but also there are customers using it as an enforcement mechanism. So if your IT team are too lazy to address a critical vulnerability after 3 months, their device is isolated. Once you isolate the device, you know as a fact they will fix the vulnerability very quick. Okay? So that is a great way to address those kind of vulnerabilities. Now, again, if your organization doesn't want the end user to be first, fine. But this can help you with specific use cases. Now, the best thing, everything is fully integrated into VMDR. So who of you have patch here? If you can raise the hands, customer that have patch, come on. Don't be shy. More, I want, even if you don't have patch, just raise the hand so I get something. If you have patch, the beauty here, we built it from the grounds up as part of patch. Okay? So it's not something new. It will be part of the workflow that you have. If you don't have patch, it allows you to do all those things from one console, and everything is reflected back in VMDR. And once we go to the demo, you'll see exactly what I mean. Now, as a follow-up session, so I didn't go into too much details here on patch and on mitigate. We have a session tomorrow, a follow-up session at 3:40, where we do a big demo and we explain and we show more and give you more in-depth information about patch. So please attend if you want to learn more about mitigation and patch. TruRisk Mitigate is going to be live very, very soon, by the end of the month. And Isolate is expected by the beginning of next year. So those are things that are happening right now. And the reason I'm telling you, and if you can switch to the demo, please. So the reason I'm telling you that is, I have 2 demos for you. First demo is a recording of a ready-to-go production environment. It's basically an environment that we've testing everything. This is real. This is not a mock-up. This is a real thing that will be live in about a month, less than a month. Okay? And I'm going to show you what I mean by mitigate. And then my second demo will show you where we're going to take this product. Those are things that we're working on right now, releasing next year. So let's start. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to VMDR. And you know what? Let me stop here for a second. Guys, so I stand there before. The problem is I'm going to interact with the screen. So those of you on both corners, look at me. It will be easier because you can see where I'm interacting. You don't have to, but it will be easier for you guys. So let's start. So I'm going to the vulnerability page. This is the same vulnerability tab as you used to. Okay? You can already see a difference. There's some counters here. So what I'm going to do for this demo, I'm just going to focus on specific vulnerabilities. And the key here to remember is very simple. You use our solution to prioritize and select the vulnerability you want to address. That's most likely how to use the solution today. So nothing new so far. So here's a list of vulnerabilities that you guys want to address. If you guys are dealing with vulnerabilities, you guys are the one that's patching it, you can actually click here, and you can literally see what patches are needed for this specific vulnerability. But that's a side note. Let's see what's new. So let's select the vulnerability that I want to fix. So I'm selecting vulnerabilities that I want to fix, okay? And I'm going to a new component that is part of patch. So you'll see in a second. You see, it's part of patch management. It's the true risk limit. It's the new functionality. What do we see here? Here on the left side, those are the vulnerabilities that you've selected. Why am I here and not in the previous screen? Because this screen is designed for your IT or for the guys that are actually responsible for deploying the patches. Previous screen was designed for you guys to prioritize and select the vulnerability that you want to address. This screen is designed for the guy that is responsible for deploying and fixing the vulnerabilities. So now, let's see what this guy can do. So let's focus first on this Print Nightmare. The one that I'm focusing on is Print Nightmare. You can see I have two options. You see two columns, remediation and mitigation. I'm clicking into the remediation one. It will actually zoom out. So you see here are the patches that are needed for this specific vulnerability. So the guy knows what he needs to do. But even more important, now he can know that he needs to make a configuration change. So Print Nightmare will not go away unless you deploy those two patches and you make this configuration change. So we already mapped it for you. Now you're just ready to deploy. Okay? And you can see everything here. So let's cancel out. And let's open the other option. On the same vulnerability, I'm now looking at the mitigation. Okay? So if your IT says, no, I cannot deploy those patches, that something can go wrong, you can easily take another option, which is stop the print server and mitigate the vulnerability. So now your operation guy or the service owner or the application owner need to decide what he wants to do, and he can start doing it directly from here. And I'll show a more in-depth demo if you come to our next to my session tomorrow. Second example that I want to show you. Let's take this one. This is a Jenkins vulnerability. Okay? Jenkins is a Linux server-based vulnerability. Your IT will say, I don't want to patch it. I don't want to install anything to my kernel. Come back in 5 months. That's where I have my maintenance window. No problem. We have a mitigation for that. Now let's explain this mitigation. What happened with this specific vulnerability, and that's what my research team told me. It basically exploits a vulnerability in the CLI. If you just block the CLI, and by blocking this port, Jenkins will continue to work, but CLI will not work. Now, the application owner, the guy that is responsible for Jenkins, knows if his customers are using the CLI or not. Assuming they are not, you basically can deploy this mitigation, and the service continue to work. Nothing changed, right? This mitigation just reduces the risk without interrupting the service. You understand the beauty here? You don't need to deploy a patch, and you deploy something that we tell you because we researched it, we tested it, and we know as a fact that if you deploy it, the risk will be reduced, but your service will continue to operate. So that's another example. So he can choose that option. And if he chooses, he can deploy directly from here. Last but not least, and that's actually a recent one, Win Verified Trust. As you probably all know, this guy cannot be solved with a patch. There's no patch for it. Okay? SCCM can deploy as many patches as they want. It will not be fixed. Qualys will still flag it as vulnerable. We're telling you here, you don't need to deploy a patch. Actually, there's a configuration change that you can deploy, and your vulnerability will be fixed. Here's the configuration change. And yes, we will give you all the information of what we're going to do, how we're going to do, so everything will be available for your guys to see. It's not a secret. So now let's see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to select this guy, and I'm going to deploy the patch, or the fix. And for those of you who are familiar with patch, it's the same workflow, nothing changed. We're defining the name, we're giving it a name, we're selecting our target assets, we're selecting the action. So in this case, the action is make this configuration change. You'll be able, if you click on this pencil there, you'll be able to drill down and see exactly what you're doing. And you can go through this wizard and actually deploy this configuration. Now you can test it before you deploy to production. You can do everything that you're used to and your IT guys are used to. As the end result, and that's again, for those of you who are familiar with patch, there is what we call jobs, right? You can see the top 2 jobs. I just run it fast forward. But all the jobs that you created, all the remediation jobs, all the patch jobs, all the mitigation jobs will be tracked here. This is just a tab that shows you all the job. You can drill down and see result. Again, we'll show a more in-depth demo tomorrow. But what I want to show you, I ran this job. The job ran actually on the device. And the part that is more important is what happens when I go back. Sorry, this is the Linux job. So this is the Jenkins one. But what I want to show you, if we go back to VMDR. And I'm going back to the vulnerability page, and I'm running the same filter that I had before. Okay? But now I just need to enable one more thing, the fix thing, because I want to review the vulnerability that's actually fixed. And as you can see here, what happened? First, look at the second line. It says active mitigated. Remember our Jenkins one? We fixed the vulnerability. So we didn't fix the vulnerability, sorry, we mitigated it. So it says mitigated. The risk was reduced, the QDS score was reduced, the vulnerability is active because we haven't patched it, it's there, but it's mitigated. So now you have a proof, and actually we're going to test and continue testing. If somebody is removing the mitigation, it's going to go back to active. So we are telling you, don't worry. Even though the vulnerability is active, we have mitigated it. So don't worry about that. You can also see your Wintrust and other thing that we deployed, we just fixed the vulnerability, right? Without the patch, Wintrust gone away. Just by deploying the vulnerability. Now with that, if we can switch to the second video. So the second video will show what's coming. Okay? So what I just showed you will be there. You can start using it by the end of the month, beginning of November. What I'm going to show you is something we're working on right now and will be available during next year. Most of it will be the first quarters, but some of it will be later. So remember we've talked about isolation. So let's see how isolation will work. So it's the same workflow. I'm in VMDR, I'm going into the elimination part, and now I want to isolate those 3 vulnerabilities. Okay? So I have an option to isolate. Now what you have to note here, I'm isolating vulnerabilities, I'm not isolating the assets. Because what I care about is making sure those vulnerabilities cannot be exploited because they are isolated. Okay? So I'm isolating the vulnerability, but in reality, I'm actually isolating those 3 machines. So I can go ahead and create a job and isolate them. And as I said, you'll see in a second, I can set some exceptions so the Qualys agent can continue to work and you can continue to patch it. It's up to you to set those exceptions. But at the end of the day, I'm isolating those assets. What's important is, once those assets are isolated, you will go back to VMDR and it will say that the device is mitigated because we haven't fixed the problem, it's mitigated, but because it is isolated. Now, if you note here, all of those vulnerabilities are isolated. Because remember, we isolated the device. So Qualys knows that there's many more vulnerabilities maybe on this device. So every vulnerability on a device that is isolated will be counted as mitigated. Okay? So again, all the vulnerability on the asset will be flagged as mitigated. Not just the one that you mitigated, because in reality, when you isolate the device, it impacts the entire asset, not just the vulnerability itself. Make sense, guys? Yeah? Can I hear yes? Good. Let's continue. Let's talk about what's coming. Back in VMDR. What I'm doing now, I'm creating a report in VMDR. This is the report that you guys are familiar with. But this is a special report. Because what this report is all about is to help you communicate with your IT and remediation teams. So I'm creating a report that will basically recommend your IT team what they can do to reduce the risk. So let's do that. Let's create this report. And the result is just a PDF or HTML. It's not part of the product, right? It's something you can send over email. So you can see I'm recommending them to target third-party application, vulnerability of Microsoft that are older than 30 days, and a server-based vulnerability, right? And I can give them all the details, how much risk you're going to reduce if you actually take our advice. But what's interesting here, and it goes for all those actions, but what's very interesting, if you look at the right-hand corner, it says view and elimination. So this is not just a report. This is an actionable report. You send it to your IT guys. Instead of sending them an Excel file with a list of vulnerabilities, you're going to send them that, and your IT guy will get it in the email, click on this link on the top, and it will take him directly to this elimination page that I showed you before. Okay? So here I am with this elimination, with the step that the user clicked. And here are the vulnerabilities that we recommend this customer, this end user, or this application owner to address. So we have 3 different options here. And why do I have 3 different options? Because I want to talk about 3 different things that we are working on. Okay, something that will come in the future. First thing is Qt FTP. This is a third-party application. But we have a problem here. Because for some reason, you guys decided that you're not going to use Qualys agent on some of those devices that has this Qt FTP. And your IT team insists that they're only going to use SCCM, nothing else. Okay? Only SCCM. They don't want to use anything else. So what we're going to do here in that case, we're going to allow you to create a job in SCCM. So your IT guys doesn't need to do anything with patch, anything with Qualys, and use SCCM to deploy this Qt FTP. And the beauty here, everything else will be back to Qualys for you guys to monitor the progress. Okay? So again, we're going to let you prioritize the vulnerabilities, send it to your IT guy, and he will use SCCM or Intune actually in the future to deploy those third-party application or any patch, and actually every mitigation that we have. Okay? So you don't need to use us if we're not on those devices. Second thing that I want to show you is how we're going to help you with containers. So one of the things that the team is working on is what we call virtual patch. Virtual patch is in-memory protection. Now, when you look at containers, you cannot patch container in real time, but you still need to address vulnerabilities in real time. Okay? So virtual patch is actually the best way for us to address vulnerabilities in production on container. So what we will help you do is, if you have this Apache huge graph, you'll be able to run through our agent that sits on the host of the container and run virtually patch this guy. Okay? So you don't actually deploy the patch, you're mitigating it until you can shift left and fix the container vulnerability in the source. Last but not least, if you have other mitigations, cloud mitigation, for example, this guy, this OpenSSL guy, okay, which runs on your cloud, and if I'll drill into it, what we can do, the mitigation strategy here will be to, instead of this specific vulnerability require SSH access. So we can limit the SSH access only for a specific set of IPs. This is a great mitigation for this specific vulnerability. So you'll be able to use our Qflow to create this workflow, which we actually will pre-build for you, so you can actually mitigate the vulnerability. So a few new things here, right? First, integration with SCCM. I'll let it finish. That's basically working with Qflow. But we will create those things for you, okay? But what I want you to remember is what we're focusing on is ways to address vulnerabilities. So what I demoed before is configuration change and mitigation. But we're expanding outside our agent into SCCM, and we haven't forgot the cloud. So all those mitigation will work even in container and cloud environment in the future. And with that, if you can go back to our to the presentation, I do one slide and okay. So just to summarize, our goal is to help you eliminate vulnerabilities. Every vulnerability, everywhere, cloud, on-prem, everywhere, with different technologies. What's coming in the next month is what we call TruRisk Mitigate, which is part of this big elimination bundle SKU. The mitigation will include 3 things. One, helping you fix vulnerabilities that do not have a patch. The other one is mitigating vulnerabilities when you do not want to deploy the patch. And the last one is addressing 0 days. Isolate, which you will isolate the device. And again, by the way, quickly, isolate is not kernel-based, just for you to, for those of you who want to ask. It's not kernel-based. The isolation thing is coming on the first quarter of next year, okay? And everything is included into one SKU. And with that, I'd like to thank you, everybody, and thanks for staying with us for the first day.